Welcome to episode 265 of the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals where you can strengthen your creative business, stay up to date on industry news, and build connections within our supportive trade association. Check it out at craftindustryalliance.org. Today on the show, we're talking about growing a sewing pattern business with my guest, Heather Liu. Heather has been passionately making her own clothes since 2010 and discovered she loves sewing so much she left a career in interior design to start Closet Core Patterns. Over the years, the company has grown and evolved and now offers standalone sewing patterns, online sewing classes, and an inspiring pattern membership and private community called Crew, where new sewing patterns and tutorials are released each month based on a changing annual design concept. This year, they also acquired the French pattern company Deer and Doe, and they plan to release future patterns through this sister brand. Heather also started Core Fabrics with her business partner, Tereska Gessing, in 2021, an online fabric store that focuses on sustainable, eco-friendly, and artisanal textiles and supplies for garment sewing. She's proudly based in Montreal, Canada. Heather, welcome.
Hi, Abby. Thanks for having me again. I was trying to remember when the last time we talked, and I'm first of all very impressed that you've had 265 episodes. That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. That's sort of crazy. We last spoke for this podcast in March of 2016, which is, I think, 8 years ago, which is a little bit insane.
Yeah, there's been a lot of change. And I think I might have had like one or two, just maybe one employee back in 2016. So when I kind of look back at that, it's quite different.
Yeah, I'm proud of both of us that we're still going. So that's great. That's great. Yay. I also wanted to just tell you that I was in Montreal over the summer on vacation and I'd never been there before and I loved it. I love Montreal. It's such a great place. So
you should have texted or got in touch with me. I could have shown you something fun. But
next time.
I'm definitely biased, but I think it's the best city in North America.
Oh my gosh, we loved it immediately. It's like Boston, but way better. So anyway.
But it's Boston, but French. So
yes. Oh, we had so much fun. Okay. So anyway, right. So we spoke in 2016 and I think there's been many changes and I want to kind of go through them and talk about sort of the evolution of a business because I think that that's a really interesting thing to examine. And so one of them is that you rebranded. So I believe back when we spoke, you were Closet Case Patterns. And then there was an announcement that you were going to be rebranding to Closet Core. So maybe you can talk about the decision, like what led up to it and how difficult and or easy it was to do, and how you're feeling about that rebrand now.
Sure. Well, when I started my sewing blog, which wasn't a company, it was just a sewing blog. I think it was in 2010 or 11. Like everybody, I had a blog and I was trying to come up with a name and I was talking to my friend Mark and we both like puns. And for some reason at the time, it was just going to be a personal style blog. I wasn't even really sewing at the time. And we were just batting stuff around and I don't know why, but like Closet Case Files came up as a name. And so that was the name of the blog, was Closet Case Files. So people who've been reading the blog since 2011 kind of still will Google, like if they're trying to find us, they'll still Google Closet Case Files. And then when I released my first pattern, I released it as Closet Case Patterns. And then as the business kind of grew over the next few years, it was just, that's kind of what I kept, was the Closet Case Patterns. We kind of dropped Closet Case Files. And it was a pun on, like you were a detective. With the Closet Case Files was like you were a detective, and here are your case files for your, again, puns. How do you explain a stupid pun joke? And it was closet, and it was my clothes. So that's kind of what the logic was behind the name. But then when you dropped the files, it just became Closet Case Patterns. And so, as you may or may not know, a closet case is something that people call somebody who's like gay and hasn't come out of the closet yet. And so that's obviously not what I meant with it, but I think people who were just meeting the brand for the first time, that was kind of the association they were getting. And so every once in a while we would hear somebody being like, this is kind of weird. Like, why is this your name? And at first, I had this kind of defensive reaction of like, well, we can't change our name. Like, we have all these patterns in our SEO, and like, how could we ever change the name? Like, and that's not what I meant. You have that knee jerk reaction a lot of the times, and defensive reaction whenever anybody brings something up that you're not kind of prepared to talk about. But I think I just sat with it it was a few years. Like, it wasn't an instant change. And I think it might have been during the pandemic, 2020? I think it was about 4 years ago that we did it. I don't remember the exact date. And there was another comment that came in, and it was like, I kind of snapped internally, and I was like, name isn't serving us anymore. And the last thing that I want somebody associating us with is this kind of like derogatory expression. And so I just decided we're going to change it. And so we kind of tried to figure out how to do this in a way that there was some transition and continuity. And it kind of just struck me. I was like, Closet Core Patterns. It's so easy. We're only changing 2 letters. It's still alliterative. It's still going to be easy for people to remember. And then once we made that decision, we moved really quickly, and I bought our domain name and, changed our logo to Closet Core. And then, these kinds of name changes and URL changes, if you're ever considering it, are actually not that complicated. It's basically just a CSV document that you give Google saying this was the old URL and this is the new one. And then really it just became about educating people that the name had changed. And we did that, I think we had a campaign of trying to help people remember. I think one of the things we did was change our hashtag to Closet Core Patterns. So we ended up encouraging people to go back and tag old makes with Closet Core Patterns just to kind of help us all remember. And I think some people, it's still kind of in their head as Closet Case, but I think we've done a pretty good job. And at this point, like, I kind of even forget that that's what our name was. And just moving forward, I'm so glad we did it. I feel like Closet Core Patterns is actually completely describes what we do. We design we hope to try to design the things that really make up the core of people's wardrobe. So it just felt really appropriate. And then when we started the fabric store, we were trying to think of names. I was like, well, obviously it has to be Core Fabrics, because that's what we're trying to do with the fabric store, is really like have those kind of core key fabrics that you want to have in your stash. And then we decided to name our membership crew. And so now there's a lot of C words floating around the office, and it's easy to get confused. And sometimes they'll be like, Core Fabrics, I mean Closet Core, I mean crew. So, I mean, if anybody else is confused, I've created this problem for all of us. But we don't have any further plans to change our name. So it's like, this is where we're at now.
And you kept the yellow.
Yeah, yellow is our color forever, I think. I think that was the other thing, is that when we changed it at first, I didn't want to change the logo. I was like, let's just try to keep things continuous. And then about a year later, I knew we wanted to update the logo, and then we ended up updating it about a year later. And we've updated some of our brand colors over the years, but that yellow is really consistent, and I don't think will ever go away.
Okay. So it sounds like it was worth doing. And so that's one change. I mean, there's been a lot of different changes, and I kind of want to talk about all of them. You referenced having a team, and that when we last spoke, you might have had 1 or 2 employees. So maybe you can describe the growth of that team over time and kind of what it looks like now. For people who are sort of maybe where you once were, it's interesting to see like what gets added and when, in order to sort of flesh out a fully productive company.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I'll say is that when I started my business back in 2013, I remember overtly saying, I will never have an employee. Like, I don't want to be anybody's boss. I want to do everything on my own. Like, nobody's ever going to care about this stuff as much as I do. And
I think a lot of us feel that way.
A lot of us feel
maybe
that
not,
way.
I'll never have an employee, but like, no one's going to care about my baby the way I care about it.
Right. And not, especially if you're an entrepreneur, we don't all have management training. So it's not, I certainly, when I started, did not know how to manage a team of people, and it just felt very overwhelming. But when we went into print, when I printed my first pattern, it just became clear to me that I couldn't do everything. And so I had hired Alexis part-time, which quickly became full-time. And she was kind of my like Girl Friday, did everything that I wasn't doing, she was doing, like an admin superstar. And then the company starts growing, and we have a wholesale thing, and like shipments are happening. And then I was like, okay, we can't do this out of my apartment anymore. So we end up finding this kind of dilapidated loft space that we start working out of. And then it was like, well, we have this office space. There's room for other people in here. So I ended up hiring Celine, my pattern maker. She had just gotten out of design school, and she had been kind of freelancing for me, but she ended up joining the team part-time. And then the company, again, we start growing. So this is probably like 2016, maybe 2017, 18 is when things really start picking up. And a really good friend of mine, Amy, started writing blog posts for us. And she was just very clearly a gifted natural marketer, even though she had no marketing background. And so she kind of came out and started helping with marketing stuff. And so it was basically just the four of us as a core group. And then I decided during the pandemic to open a fabric store. I had got a house up north and was spending a lot of time alone in the woods, and I think just didn't have enough to do. And was just kind of thinking and ideating, and just the kind of vision for what that fabric store was going to look like kind of came to me really kind of all at once. And so I ended up approaching my oldest and my best friend, Tereska, to if she wanted to do this with me, because she was also another entrepreneur. She had this amazing organic vegetable gardening business that she had started with her husband, and she ended up kind of giving him the business and kind of going and working in startup culture. But she wasn't really happy at work. And we had a long story, but we had like bought a building together in our early 20s and had this kind of experience of running this business together back 20 years ago. And so when I was thinking about the fabric store, I'm like, I just don't have the bandwidth to do this on my own, but I could do it with Tereska. And so we started building that business. And it was about a year of us just kind of developing what it was going to look like before we even launched. And we were initially planning on working out of my old space, but it just wasn't big enough for the amount of inventory we were planning on carrying. So we found another bigger dilapidated loft space, which I'm talking to you from now. And then all of a sudden we have 5,000 square feet and we start this fabric store, and we need a bigger team. Well, at least I think it's important to understand, like, the fabric store really is a separate corporation.
Okay.
Like on the back end, for various reasons, partly because I have a partner in one business and I don't have a partner in the other. And so that business, Core Fabrics, now has a staff of 6, including Tereska, 7, including me. And then when we moved into this space, Alexis, who had been with me since 2014, was just ready for the next stage in her life. And so she was ready to leave. And I brought in a new project manager. And then things just, I don't know, it's kind of like a snowball running downhill. Like, all of a sudden, right now at Closet Core, we have 8 employees. And that kind of happened organically, and we started adding more people to the team once we started the pattern membership, because obviously we went from doing 5 to 6 patterns a year to 16 to 17, and that just required more people. And so with Closet Core now, there's 3 people on our marketing team, there's 3 people on the pattern team. There is a shipping coordinator, Rika, who works between the 2 businesses, and then we also now have a full-time customer service person. So sometimes I come into work, and when everybody's here, it can be a little overwhelming if I'm just kind of present in the moment and think, like, okay, 10 years ago there was none of this existed, and now all of a sudden it does. So it's just funny when I think back to me being like, I'm never ever going to have an employee. I don't ever want to be anybody's boss, to it actually being the thing that I probably love the most about my job, and the thing I'm most grateful for is having the most incredible team of people on earth working here. Like, we all come into work every day and are so grateful to be here, love the work that we're doing, and everybody just really likes each other. And they all hang out outside of work and go on all these fun adventures. I kind of feel a little left out sometimes because I'm like, I want to hang out with you guys on the weekend. But I already work with 2 of my best friends, so it's like I have to set some boundaries. I can't be best friends with everybody. But I think collectively, what I don't think I understood back in the beginning when I was saying I didn't want to be a boss is that there's a limited amount of time, there's a limited amount of energy, and if you actually really want to build something meaningful and lasting, it's going to be much better when you're able to tap into the energy and the skill and the passion of other people. And everybody who works for me has different interests and different lived experiences and different points of view, and they bring that richness to the work that we do collectively. It's just not about me anymore. It's really about us. And I think I really try to make decisions for us as a team. And when something big happens like Deer and Doe, I'm not making that decision unilaterally. Like, it's something that we are discussing as a team and deciding as a team whether or not we are able and willing to take on anything new. So that's been kind of a surprising part. But it's also come with a lot of learning because, I've had to learn how to become a boss, and I think I'm getting better at it every day. I still have a lot to learn, but I think it surprised me at just how much I enjoy it.
And how about the pressure of knowing that the work or the business that you've built is what's putting food on other people's table. In other words, like if you make the wrong decision, even if it's a collective decision, ultimately it's your decision because you own the company. And if that happens and things go south, then someone's going to lose their job or have their pay cut, et cetera. And that, I mean, for me, I feel like that's a lot of pressure to feel like your work is supporting other people.
It is a huge amount of pressure, I'm not going to lie. And it's most of the women who work, because it's mostly women who work here, most of them have families. So it's not just them either. It's their kids, it's their partners, it's whatever. People have mortgages to pay. I try not to think too much about that, but I will say when I have to make difficult decisions, that is the thing that I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking about the bottom line in terms of what it means for my pocketbook. I'm thinking about what it means for my team. And I think as businesses grow, when you start bringing more people on board, you can't make impulsive, spur of the moment, uninformed decisions anymore because the ramifications are so much greater. And I have been, unfortunately, in the position the last few years, especially with the fabric store, we were overstaffed when we started, and that's a whole thing we can get into or not, but like we ended up having to lay off 2 people, and it was like one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, like 2 people that I really respected and loved and really did not want to see go. And we had to make that tough decision. And so now I really, make decisions going forward, knowing like this is the team that I have and I want to make sure everybody has their job. And in a year from now or 5 years from now, I haven't made the wrong decision and negatively impacted somebody in that way, especially because I have been fired and or laid off from almost every job I ever had before I started my business. I really kind of understand what it feels like in a very deep way to be on the other side of that table. And so it's kind of a responsibility I really don't take lightly.
And the sewing pattern landscape has also changed over the course of you starting Closet Case Files, the blog, through now. I mean, in the last, let's just say that's like 12 years, 15 years, there were independent sewing pattern designers back then, but it was a much smaller landscape maybe, and there weren't maybe so many established brands. And now I just wonder what you think now, like when you look out there at the sewing pattern world, what are you seeing now that maybe has changed from back then?
Well, I'm very offline. So I'm not on social media anymore. And I don't, there's a handful of newsletters I subscribe to because I'm friends with the people who own the companies. And maybe that's the only way I'm kind of keeping in touch. But I actually don't know on a micro level what's happening in the sewing pattern industry. I don't know what patterns are coming out every week. I don't know what the new hot companies are. I don't see even like what companies or customers are using because I'm not on Instagram the way that I used to be. And this obviously has like pros and cons. Like I think the pro is that I am very much an idea generating person, to the point where I kind of have to have people on the team act as breaks, because if they weren't acting like breaks, we would just every day I would be coming in with a new idea. And because I'm not influenced or being kind of impacted about what's kind of happening in our niche in that way, I feel like I have less anxiety. I have less, I'm not comparing myself, and I'm not comparing what we're doing to what other people are doing. I think we're really I'm almost like in a vacuum that way, and just kind of making decisions from a very kind of intuitive place based on what's maybe happening out in the world, and less what I'm seeing happening in the kind of sewing community. So that's the positive. The downside is that everybody laughs at me that I have no idea what's going on. Half the time, there's a meme or there's a joke or there's something on social media, and I'm like, what? Unless they tell me about it or I hear about it on a podcast or it's in the New York Times, I'm not up to date. So, but for me, the cost benefit analysis is just, it's been much healthier for me to not be as involved. Roundabout way of saying that I don't know if I actually am the best person to ask about what the state of the sewing pattern industry is. I can just say that when I started, I remember feeling like there's already so many pattern brands, how is there possibly going to be room for me? And now obviously there's, I don't know, dozens, hundreds more. I think a lot of people now too, Etsy, I think is a big starting ground for a lot of smaller brands, where whenever I kind of go on Etsy, I'm seeing all these companies I'd never heard of. And it's been interesting to see too, the people that I came up with and friends who started businesses around the same time, how we've all chosen to evolve our brands in different ways. But I think what's exciting about where we're at now is that there's just more people sewing than ever. And I think there's more people kind of pursuing this as a craft and as a hobby than there were, like even more, way more than we in 2011, because back then you had to stumble on a sewing blog, and now all you have to do is go on Instagram and realize, oh, this is a thing that I can do. So, I mean, yeah, it's a different position, but again, like, I don't know how objective I can kind of be about the industry as a whole.
It sounds like there was a time when you were on Instagram a ton, and I'm wondering whether the decision to disengage and sort of turn a lot of that off was like self-protective, or I mean, it has been for me. I feel like I'm still there in a certain way, but there's a lot of it that I chose to sort of stop doing in a way that for me is a boundary that was important. And I don't know if that resonates for you.
Oh, absolutely. I think the internet in general and social media in particular has become a repository for everybody's anxiety. And as somebody who struggles with anxiety day to day, like mainlining millions of people's of anxiety every time I open my phone was just literally the worst thing I could do for my mental health. And I think, too, as like a very sensitive person and a creative person, when it was me who was like moderating our Instagram channel, even if people were trying to provide give like good feedback, sometimes if it just hit me on the wrong day, it would stick with me. And like my pathology is that I have imaginary conversations with critics in my brain. And so if I'm engaging with that feedback all the time in a really deep, high touch way, my brain is just kind of occupied with these arguments and or not even arguments, but these conversations that I'm having and trying to kind of like explain to this imaginary person in my head why I made the decision I made. And so obviously you become the person who's literally, I have been caught like talking to myself while I'm walking my dog, speaking to these imaginary people in my head. And so that's certainly kind of taking a step back from that direct interaction with, at this point, like we have 200,000 followers on Instagram. Like I just don't have the bandwidth on a one-on-one level to engage with everybody in every comment section in every DM. Certainly like I will go in on a big day or like from time to time, like I'm going in and I'm like reading comments and seeing where things are at, but I'm not engaging with it to the level that I used to. And during the pandemic, I think a lot of us, discovered habits that we had that were unhealthy. And what I was doing every morning was spending like anywhere from an hour to 2 hours on my phone on Instagram, just wasting my one wild, precious life, on my phone. And during the pandemic, I quit vaping, I quit nicotine, and I ended up just trying to take a break from Instagram for a couple months just to try to get a little headspace. And the longer I took a break from it, the harder it was actually to go back. It was whenever I would, if I would get the app on my phone again and I'd get on and I'd get pulled into that and start processing everybody's anxieties and fears and everything else. And this is just on my own personal feed, right? Like not even necessarily connected to feedback that's coming in through the business. I would just instantly go to this like very dark, anxious place. And so it was an interesting transition because all of a sudden you're like, do I need to document my life? Like, what is the point of this photo if I'm not going to post it on Instagram? Like, if a tree falls in the forest, is there anyone here? So, I would go on vacation and I would to Italy and I would take like 4 photos, I was living my life. I wasn't documenting it anymore.
I found that like texting those photos to my sister was just as satisfying.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I would do. Like I would have, I would send friends like photo albums and stuff like that, but I just don't take as many photos. And just the more time has passed, and I think the darker and the worse it's gotten because of the way that these social media conglomerates have decided to try to optimize our time online. It's kind of almost like, it's like I used to smoke cigarettes. It's like sometimes I see people smoking cigarettes and I'm like, how are you putting that in your mouth? And that's kind of how I feel sometimes when I'm seeing people like on the endless Instagram scroll, like look outside, take a walk. But this isn't, I want to make it really clear. I'm not judging anybody else's choices. Like this was just a decision I had to make for myself. And I think the biggest impact I think it's made on the business is that because I am making decisions and coming up with ideas from a more pure, I don't want to say more pure place, but like a less conflicted place and a less noisy place. And I'm not paying attention to what other people are doing. I'm not paying attention to how other people are running their businesses. I'm not paying attention to micro trends. Like I'm really like, I'm walking down the street and I'm feeling inspired by something that somebody is wearing, or I'm watching a movie and I'm inspired by a garment, or I'm on Pinterest, but it's not that micro level engagement that I was doing before. And I think, frankly, the reason that we've been able to do all of I don't think that I don't think it's a coincidence that around the same time that I quit social media, my business like kind of grew by leaps and bounds. And I think we're doing the most exciting creative work we've ever done. And it's because I am not on social media and I am not kind of trapped in that comparison vortex and the self-doubt vortex and the self-critical vortex. And it's just been, I think, kind of game-changing for us. So I hope I can keep it up, but that's kind of where I'm at with it.
And you talked about during the pandemic being away in your sort of vacation locale and coming up with this idea to start a fabric shop. And an online fabric shop is a really big endeavor because, you know, you have inventory with a pattern business because you have print patterns, but we're talking a lot of different sorts of inventory. We're talking a lot of storage and cutting, and it's a whole different business. It's related, but it's pretty different. Plus going in with a partner and having had a business partner, that's a whole thing to sort of wade into, sharing control of a business as well. So let's talk a little bit about Core Fabrics and what your concept was. I mean, you mentioned that you really wanted fabrics that would be core to the, you know, garments you're making for your wardrobe. But what was the sort of impetus for deciding like, okay, this is a good, you know, it's almost like vertical integration. Like we're gonna not only provide the patterns, but also the things you're going to make the patterns out of. And I don't know whether you see other ways to vertically integrate in the future, but that one is sort of a natural choice, but a hard one.
Abby, you nailed it. I had no earthly idea what I was signing up for when we started the business. I just thought, well, I'm good at this business, I'll be good at this one. And I was not, and we were not. And frankly, we would have gone out of business within the first year if I had to collect a salary, for example, because I have, you know, an income from Closet Core. You know, but if I was actually depending on Core Fabrics for an income, that wouldn't have happened because we were in the red for almost the first year and a half that we were in business, and really had no idea. Between the two of us had never run an inventory business like that. Like I said, I do carry inventory with patterns, but it is a completely different ballgame. The margins are completely different. The investment on inventory is much smaller. And then all of a sudden we have this massive, enormous inventory, and then having to figure out costs, like cash flow. Like I'd never had to think about cash flow ever. Because it was just it was just, you know, unless all of a sudden I hired 5 people and couldn't afford the salaries, but I was always able to manage the cash flow. But all of a sudden you have purchases. So you're making, you know, you're ordering from a mill. It's not going to arrive in 6 months. They need payment right away. You don't, you know, you have to somehow come up with that money. So that could be a whole 3-hour conversation about how dumb and uninformed we were when we went in, and how much we've learned. And I think it's completely a credit to my incredible business partner. I know working with friends and family is not for everybody. And I think you kind of have to really know well the person that you're going into business with. But I never for a moment doubted that we would be able to do this together. And I think it's because we have really different skill sets. I'm kind of creative, and, you know, the kind of creative director, I'm the one who's coming up with the ideas, and Truska is very much operations. And there's not a lot of overlap between the things that we do well. So we don't have a lot of conflict, and we don't step on each other's toes. And she really runs the company. Like I have meetings with them. I have Wednesdays basically are my Core Fabrics days. And that's when we're planning our fabric calendar and choosing colors and choosing prints. And, you know, I'm working with their marketing team to kind of help keep things on track. But she, on a day-to-day level, manages that business, and it's a very, very complex and complicated business. And she is an operational genius. And again, if it wasn't her, if it was just me, we would have gone out of business. And I think the first year, we're still in quite a bit of debt, although we're slowly paying it off. But we just really didn't understand volumes yet, and we're placing these ridiculous orders, and way too much fabric was coming in, and we weren't generating enough revenue, and we really got into a dark place where we're like, this business might go under, we might lose all of this money. And again, this is just a credit to Tresca, really just turned things around and became very, very, just basically taught herself finance and taught herself the kind of like the financial elements of running a business, looking at your cash flow, your statements, all of that stuff, really understanding how all of these come together, defining a budget, actually figuring out based on our sales volume, how much we were actually allowed to spend. And so she's really turned things around. And this year we're actually profitable, which is very exciting. But we've had a lot of strategic shifts over the years, and we're still, I think, really are very clear on our identity. And I guess that's something I kind of had skimmed over in this, thinking of why I opened the fabric store to begin with, which is just like, we were sewing samples all the time, and we were constantly looking for fabric. And, you know, as a designer, I want to have complete control over the thing that we are photographing and putting out there. And I was really relying on like what was in stock or what was in inventory in other fabric stores. And as somebody who has a lot of climate change anxiety and is very conscious of my own spending, there just weren't very many options for like high quality fashion fabrics that were also sustainable. And so that has been its own learning journey. You know, I think we were really naive that we were going to be able to find stuff really easily, and that's just not been the case. And again, one of Tresca's gifts is she's like a dogged researcher. And so we have basically tracked down some of the best mills in the world and harassed them into working with us, because most of the time the orders that we're making would typically be too small for most people to work with us. And so we've just gotten better at finding those people that generally don't work with the fabric industry. And they're generally just working in the fashion industry, and it's something that we're expanding. And our kind of goal is in the next few years that we're not really using shared distributors. I think a lot of fabric stores end up getting fabric from the same place, and kind of by and large, we don't want to be pulling from the same pool. And so that's kind of what we're working on now, is just really developing our own supply chains. So we have a really unique one-of-a-kind product that people can't find anywhere else. And so this year we're kind of debuting a few lines where we really, like, down to the weave of the fabric and down to the colors that we chose, are completely custom. And this is where we're kind of hoping to move things going forward. But again, like, I just have to give major props to my partner, because again, like, we wouldn't be here without her. I'm the more kind of impulsive one out of the two of us, and I don't think I would have had the kind of wherewithal to really sit down and do the hard work she's done to, like, keep us on track.
It's interesting because it made me think of when I spoke to the women who own Pearl Soho. This was before they closed their New York shop, but they were really in the same line of thinking around sourcing fabrics that were 100% unique to them, rather than carrying the quilting fabrics, for example, that are available from big distributors that almost all quilt shops have access to. And that they had done that, and they were still carrying Liberty, but they were also really looking into sourcing their own unique, you know, you only get it at Pearl Soho, as a better way forward. So
I think for us, I mean, the challenge obviously then is that you have to be buying in really big quantities. And so it's a different marketing strategy, and it's a different, it's just a different way to approach buying. And so the entire thing kind of shifts on its head. And so I would say that the two of us in particular right now are very much focused on a sustainable, and not only just sustainable in the kind of environmental sense of the word, but like sustainable for us as a company, kind of like buying strategy. Because for us, we really, really, really believe in our mission. Like, I'm really, really proud of what we're doing with that at that company, and the kind of products that we're discovering and being able to bring to our customers. And we just want to make sure that we're able to do that for like the next 20 years. And so, yeah, it's definitely been a huge, huge learning curve the last couple of years.
And does that preclude buying dead stock fabric? Because that would be another way to be sustainable, right? Is to say, well, there's all this excess in fashion and there's all this dead stock fabric. And, there are online fabric shops that's where they're sourcing from. So, but at the same time, once it's gone, it's gone.
The thing with dead stock is I would like on a sustainability index, which we actually have one at Core Fabrics, we actually have a rating system that we use. Dead stock is basically like the bare minimum for us. It's maybe net negative, but it's not net positive. And we're looking at bringing things in that are actually net positive. So is that was the cotton grown in a carbon capture system? Was it grown by regenerative farms? Even taking a step above dead stock. But certainly we do carry dead stock. I think for us, sometimes we won't carry virgin polyester. We try not to. So, if there's any polyester that's coming into the shop, it's generally only going to be through dead stock. I'm not going to ask a mill to produce more using petroleum. That's not even a question. But again, the problem with dead stock is it's somewhat limited in quantity. And for us, our expenses to get a fabric online, I don't know because I don't know what it costs other people, but it's extraordinary how expensive it is for us to get a fabric online. We have a professional photographer. We capture an unreal amount of information. We do Pantone color matching. There is, I don't know, maybe 20 to 30 points of information that we are sharing with every fabric that we carry, that in order for us to even make any type of profit on the profit list in our shop, we have to be buying and selling at a pretty big minimum. So we can't get 20 yards. And listen, there are places where we could probably go and source some beautiful couture quality fabric for 20 meters, but the cost for us to get it online just completely, it's just not enough yardage. So we've become kind of limited too with the amount of dead stock that we want to carry. But again, going forward, I think the amount of dead stock we carry is going to decrease as we start bringing in our own lines where we have complete and utter control over every single step of the manufacturing process, down to knowing how the workers are treated, where the water is coming from, how the water is being recirculated, what kind of dyes they're using, where is the fiber coming from. That's the type of thing that I think we're more interested in investing our energy going forward.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the membership. So, although you are sort of somewhat removed from what's happening in the sewing world, you must be aware that memberships are a thing. And we see lots of different sewing pattern companies and other kinds of craft companies, by the way, start memberships. And I think it's a great business model. I have a membership myself. Craft Industry Alliance is a membership. Very different sort. But what was the impetus to starting a membership? And maybe what did it entail to do it? I mean, you talked about the rate of releases really ramping up between prior when you were selling a la carte patterns to now when you're selling a membership where people are getting many, many more patterns. I feel like Colette, maybe
they were definitely the first. Big
yeah, I was going to say
yeah. Big
props to
Sari.
Sari. She sort of saw where things were headed. And other people have followed suit, but in different ways. So what was your analysis that led to Crew?
It's been something Amy and I had been talking about for a few years, and Celine, our pattern maker, to some degree, where I don't remember when we really started having the conversation, but I think the idea and the challenge of it was very exciting to us. And to be completely transparent, I think like a lot of craft businesses, 2020 and to some degree 2021 were boom years for us because so many people were home and sewing, and we had almost more growth than we'd had in that year and a half than I've seen since, or probably will ever see again. And then it crashed. And so I had kind of geared up our business and had hired more staff and had not assuming that this was going to kind of go forever, but we're just like, oh, well, we've grew 35% this year, in the last year and a half. So I'm going to hire 35% more staff. And then had one of the worst years we've ever had, and realized that at the scale that the business was at and the amount of staff I had and our overhead, that if we had a dud pattern, I was laying somebody off. And we needed to build more security into the income that I had coming in so that I could just predictably know where income was coming from and just have a more stable, less feast or famine kind of income model. So that was part of it. And so we were still talking about this, and then Jenny at Cashmere launched Cashmere Club, and Jenny and I are very good friends, and I think people would always be surprised if they actually knew how much we all talked. And Jenny and I are always helping each other out. We're very transparent with each other. We're like, she'll text me and be like, "What are you doing here?" And I'll ask her the same thing. And when I mentioned that we were thinking about doing it, she was incredibly supportive and kind of gave me a lot of encouragement and really kind of like was there to answer questions about how I was going to do it. I think because Jenny's smart and she understands that like we all have different things that we're doing and appealing to different people. And I really think what she's doing with Club is awesome, but appeals to, it's just, we're kind of doing different things and it appeals to different people. And it's just, there's room for everybody. And it's the same with CMARC. I think there really is room for everybody. So I think what really appealed to us with a membership model was that we could design in collections. And up until then, I kind of experimented with patterns, dropping patterns in collections. But then you're dropping 3 or 4 patterns at the same time. And if somebody has a pattern budget that month, they don't have the budget for all 4, right? And so we would sometimes drop collections and like maybe 1 or 2 of them would do well and then the other 2 wouldn't. And then all that kind of energy that went into that was just kind of sitting there. And so I just got really excited about the idea of having a concept, designing 12 patterns within that concept, slowly releasing them once a month, and being able, alongside the fabric store, to have a kind of more complete and conceptual vision for the work that we're doing that isn't just, here's a pattern, like I am I went to interior design school, like I love high concept stuff. And so it kind of allowed us to think about things in a more conceptual way while still being approachable and things that people would want to sew. So the other thing that excited me is I was very, very into having and creating and building a community that wasn't on social media. And so that has been something that has been this like unexpected gift of Crew. We have a private community, and it is like the warmest, loveliest, funnest place online. I love going in a couple times a week and just seeing what people are making. I'm even sharing some of my own, like, what I'm renovating my house right now. So I'll go in and we have like a channel that it's just for other obsessions that aren't sewing. And so I can kind of go and talk about that and share that. And it's just the people that are there really want to be there. And it's just a really lovely place. So I'm getting that kind of connection with our customers and I'm getting to be involved, but it's not in this like huge void that is social media. And then it's just allowed us to kind of do all sorts of fun things and has really pushed us in a lot of different directions, figuring out how to do video content, long form sew-alongs in a sustainable way. It's really increased the amount of like blog posts that we're writing and thinking about skill building in a different way. And this year, our first year, the theme was color. And we were kind of, I'm really proud of what we did last year, but it was definitely like a growth year and us just figuring out like how do we even change our production model from this like 1 every 2 months to one a month, sometimes 2 patterns a month if we still have a standalone CCP pattern coming out. And I would say this year was when we really found our groove. And I think the patterns we designed this year are some of the best patterns we've ever done in the history of the company. I think we're doing some really cool, innovative stuff. We have really fun patterns coming. And the idea this year was that it's a capsule wardrobe. So everything kind of mixes and matches with each other. So you get 12 patterns, but you're really getting this like beautiful, cohesive, kind of quiet luxury wardrobe. And next year, the concept's going to change to something totally different. So every year for us, it's just this like creative playground where we get to just explore ideas in a different way. And because these patterns aren't going to print, because they're just monthly, I don't need to think about, whether or not this is a pattern that's going to go into print and in somebody's pattern catalog for the next 25 years. We can look at trends a little bit more. We can have more fun with like colors and fabrics and all that stuff. And so it's actually just been this very joyful project, but it has totally transformed the way that we work and has made us a lot more efficient. Even though that's like its own process, like right now this week, we're working on a pattern and we're just coming up against some roadblocks and I'm like, oh, these are these things that are kind of impeding our workflow. And so now I see my role a lot more as how do I kind of take this team of people and like use everybody's skills to the best and get us as organized as possible and as systemized as possible so that we're able to create and do our work and it still be fun, but in a non-stressful, non-burnout scenario. And that's kind of what I'm focused on right now, just among the team, is like how we can just work very smoothly and cleanly and neatly and have everybody not feeling like overburdened or kind of steamrolled by the amount of work that there is to do.
And it's built on Shopify
Yeah, we are definitely a Shopify business.
and the membership as well.
Yeah, the membership as well. We've had to do a lot of hacky things because, the beautiful thing about Shopify is that there's an app to do almost everything, but the type of membership that we do is not actually supported by most membership apps. Most membership apps for Shopify are designed for like, you're a coffee company and every month we're going to send you another bag of coffee, but that's not how ours works. It's content based and it needs to come out on the first day of the month. So the app that we're using, we've had to really wrangle in ways that have driven me so crazy that we're now actually just developing our own app. So we're hoping to have that out this year. I don't think the customer is going to feel that. It's really just more about how it's processing and handling payments and handling cancellations and things like that. But that's been its own thing, is just like working with our developer and just trying to figure out like, how do we actually make this work for us? I think one of the things that I'm kind of obsessed with is UX, user experience, design. And so we're constantly tweaking the website, redesigning the website, trying to make it more functional and easy to browse. And so it's been kind of a fun exercise for me to see this system and then try to figure out how to make it work. So our customer has a very easy, interface and like can get in and out without any headache and without too much kind of manual work on our end. So that's our big goal this year.
And did it fix the feast or famine cycle?
It's definitely, yes, it has. And yes. Short answer is yes. We have like a big, generally like there's a month or two a year. We have a lot of people kind of signing up all at once. And so you have to just kind of make sure that you're distributing that income throughout the rest of the year. But I think especially as people get to know how our membership works, because I think when we started we got some pushback from customers who just like hate subscription services.
Yeah.
I get it. This is the world we live in right now. Like everything is a subscription service. I'm now signed up to I don't even know how many Substacks I pay for every month. But the reality is if you're not watching commercial TV anymore, right? Like there's no, that typical advertising revenues are dead. Models are dead, right? So, an old school blog was making money on advertising revenue. That's just, that has decreased so much. And so everybody is looking for diverse revenue streams. And this is just the way things are going to moving forward. For us, we've tried to make it really accessible where you can kind of come in and out for the month. There's no minimum amount of time. If you just want to come in and get the pattern, it's $12. It's $4 less than our typical pattern is. You can cancel right away, so you're not going to be billed the next month. And then for that month, you get to participate in our community and you get to enjoy all of the resources we're creating. Like, I actually think it's an incredible deal. But I think there's been a lot of education for people to understand, like, oh, that's even a possibility. Like, you can just come in and out. You are not obligated to stay. What's been exciting for us, though, is that when we have somebody sign up for an unlimited or an annual membership, we're able to do more things. And so one of the things we have now is a fit concierge. So part of our private community, if you're an unlimited member, you get access to Gabby. And she answers people's fitting questions and goes like very deep, diagnosing and solving people's fit problems. So if you're somebody whose fitting is a challenge if you join Crew and you're paying that kind of annual fee, that's the kind of white glove service that you're getting. And that really excites me because I know fitting is something that really can make or break a sewing practice. And if it's something you're consistently struggling with, you're just going to stop sewing. So I'm really excited that we're able to kind of remove that pain point for people. And then for people who just want to dip in and out, that's also possible.
All right, let's talk about this acquisition. So you reached out to me a couple months ago and are like, big news is coming. And it turned out that it was that you were going to be acquiring another pattern company, a French pattern company called Durando. They've been around for a long time, have a lovely reputation. And it sounds like the co-founders were ready to move on with their lives to do other things. And I am really happy that the company found a new home. I feel like often in the crafts industry, people just shut down rather than sell. And maybe we can talk a little bit about why you think that happens. I mean, selling seems easy, but it's actually really hard. It's hard on the seller end and it's hard on the buyer end. I mean, there's a lot that goes into figuring out how to sell a business and how to buy a business. So how did you first discover that this was a possibility for you? And what was the equation that went on to make the decision to do it?
Well, I think like the word acquire is funny because it like I've been watching Succession and it sounds really dark. Like we went in and we like acquired this company. It was hostile and we went in it. That's not what
Hmm.
happened.
No.
I during the pandemic, there was a few pattern makers and I that were having a monthly call. Again, we're all friends with each other, and we were just, all commiserating things that we were struggling with, and it became really great at the time just to, like I'm having this weird issue in Shopify. Is anybody else having this issue? Or we would just kind of have kind of that valve. It was almost like a mastermind group. And Camille from Deer, who was one of the founders of Deer and Doe, she became a partner maybe about 6-7 years ago with Eleanor, who started the company originally. So Camille was joining these meetings, and we got to know each other a little bit. And I think at one point we had talked about maybe doing some co-marketing to each other's newsletter base, because Closet Core Patterns is based in Quebec. We are a bilingual company. Our website's bilingual. If you don't live in Quebec, there's a lot of very intense language laws here that we have to follow. And I was just interested. So we have all these French patterns, and I was like, okay, well, we both have like a bilingual audience, but I don't know how well they know each other. Maybe this is something we would talk about. So we kind of like talked about it, and then it kind of fell off, and neither of us really follow through. But I think that I'd stuck with Kimmy. And I can't speak too much about their own personal decisions. If anybody's interested, they can go to the Closet Core blog, where I write about what happened, and I link to some posts that they had personally written. But basically, they had both been through a series of pretty harrowing personal events over the last few years, and we're both feeling pretty burned out, pretty severely burned out. And we're just kind of ready to let go and move on to the next stage, which I appreciate must have been incredibly difficult. I am so attached to Closet Core. I know that it was something that they wrestled with for a really long time. So when they were thinking, they were kind of figuring out what their options were. And, one of them was like, okay, well, do we just have like a going out of business sale and put everything marked down and kind of like make as much as we can and kind of shut her down? But I think they had put their heart and soul into this business for the last 11 or 12 years and really, really didn't want to do that. And I think Deer and Doe Patterns, if you had asked me, Heather, you have here is the sewing brands out there, like which one would you love to add to the family? Like Deer and Doe probably actually would have been number one, because I think their aesthetic is so beautiful. And as a North American who kind of fetishizes like French style, like they have that in spades, and it's just very elegant and chic and romantic and feminine and beautiful. And they have I guess we now have such a beautiful brand aesthetic. The photography, it's very evocative. The clothes feel very emotional to me. And Eleanor is a meticulous drafter. They're so beautifully drafted. The instructions are great. So trying to get back on track. So anyway, they were kind of ready. And so they were talking about their options, and they just didn't want to, they didn't want to just shut the company down, but they were also very cautious about selling. There was a case about 5 or 6 years ago of another indie pattern company. I don't really want to say the name, but there was another indie pattern company that was independently owned, that was sold, that was beloved within the sewing community, and was sold to another company that was basically like, we are going to keep this brand alive and we're going to release new patterns and don't worry. And literally nothing has happened since. It basically has just died out in this kind of sad way. And they just didn't want that to happen. They didn't want to sell the company to somebody who was just kind of not going to do anything with it. And so we were basically the first people that they approached. And I kind of got an email from Camille out of the blue saying, hey, we're thinking about selling Deer and Doe. Would you be interested? And I was completely shocked. I remember kind of checking my email, walking into the lunchroom, and everybody was like, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? And I was like, I just got the craziest email. And so we ended up getting on a call to talk a little bit more about it. And I wanted to kind of reassure myself that they were sure, that's a really big decision. I wanted to kind of get a sense of where they were at, were they just maybe kind of in an emotional place and needed a little space? And they were both basically like, no, like we've wanted to do this for a long time. Like it's time. And we want it to be you. We know that you're going to take good care of the company. And I also was like, well, if we do this, I don't want to do it and not evolve the brand. Like I wouldn't want to do this just
Yeah.
for the catalog. Like I think what's actually most interesting is where we could take things. And so I think that was really exciting to them, that it was like they could see my excitement. And I mean, the joke we were kind of making in the office is like, we were like the new foster parents, we were like, we promise we're going to take care of your baby. You can't take, like you can't take the care of the baby right now, but we promise like we're going to take such good care of the baby. And so it was just, we kind of had a couple of conversations and I was like, okay, guys, like give me a month. I need a month to think about this. And I don't know, it was much faster than that. I think I went and talked to the team. We had a really good meeting and I said, look, like we have this opportunity. We have our hands full. And like that year, the joke had been like, we have like a word of the year and we try to set intentions every year. And the intention that year was like no new businesses. Like I had started the fabric store and then we started Crew and everybody was like, okay, no new businesses. And I was like, right, guys, like no new businesses. I promise. We're just going to focus. And then somebody came and was like, hey, do you want this business? And I was like, So I was like, I am aware that my intention this year was to not start any new businesses, but this opportunity has come up. And I think that we would kill this. I think my pattern maker is from France, Celine, and she was just like, her eyes lit up like saucers. She was just like, oh yes, like let me design Durando patterns. My pattern team, like the three of them, they're all French speaking. They were all just like, yay, so excited. And then Amy and like Cassie and everybody, Montserrat, like all of us were just like visibly so excited about this opportunity. But again, like I have to be careful because even if we're all excited, doesn't necessarily mean that we have the capability and that like my business coach always tells me, like, it's not about being whether or not capable of doing it, it's whether or not you have the capacity to do it. So I knew we were capable of doing it. And what I needed to figure out, what we all needed to talk about was whether or not we had the capacity to do it, because the last thing I wanted to do was to let Kimmy and Eleanor down. And even more than that was to let their like very loyal fans down, that this company that they had loved and that had taught them how to sew kind of wasn't where it needed to be. But after a lot of discussion, we really were like, no, we can do this. And so it's kind of forced us once again to take a look at our processes and to figure out how we do things and to get more efficient while still having the kind of very intense level of quality and commitment to our product. So that is not in any way being affected, but it is just about figuring out how to do more in a sustainable way. Once again, this is kind of like my plan this year, is just kind of getting us on this track. So this year we started talking about this in November. It was basically final as of the announcement last week. I've gone into a tremendous amount of debt to pay for the company. And this year we're really just focused on getting to know this new audience who are 70% French speaking. It's been very interesting for us to think, oh, we have this bilingual website and we're finding out all of these places where things are not bilingual. So thankfully, our customer service person, Sylvie, who's from France, she actually used to work for Durando for years. She's unbelievable. We love her. She's basically doing all of our translations now, and she's finding all of these places that still need to be corrected. And this year, it's just about like getting to know this audience, getting to know the brand, planning for next year. And we are hoping to expand a number of their more best-selling patterns in plus sizes. Right now, I think they only have maybe 8 or 9 patterns in extended sizing. And they have a huge pattern catalog. So we're just going to start looking at those patterns to make sure that we can kind of make more and more of them available in inclusive sizing. And then planning for next year. So it's been fascinating because I don't think people get the opportunity to like look under the hood.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And it's been really interesting for me to see how they were running Durando and the decisions they were making and how those are different from the ones we were making. And I've found been very inspired by some of the things that they were doing, and then also saw some ways that we could apply our processes and systems and make things a little bit more efficient. And I think it taught me a very valuable lesson about how much I need to protect myself from burnout, because it is really easy to push yourself too far. And when it is your business and there's no reason to stop sometimes. Like if I let myself, I could let myself work till 9 or 10 o'clock every night, because there's just never.
There's no guardrails.
There's no guardrails. And so I think seeing these two women who I respect and love really get to that place, to the point where they just couldn't do it anymore, has just made me realize how much I have to kind of build my own guardrails and my own boundaries so that I have the energy to do this for the next 20 years. And I want to do this for the next 20 years. So it's been really instructive in a lot of different ways. And we're just very excited. It's just a new person to design for. It's a new style. It's a new aesthetic. We're all feeling very creatively inspired, and it's just about doing it all in a sustainable way. So we're all energized and creative and want to come into work and can kind of like have the room on our plate for all of the food.
Well, congratulations to you. I think it's really exciting and inspiring to watch. So, yeah, I just think it's great. I want to make sure we get to your recommendation list before we wrap up. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had talked about before we move to those?
I feel like I should just preface everything I said about not being on social media to say this, because I don't want people to feel like I don't care what they think. I like love our customers so much. Like, I'm going to try not to get emotional about it. Like, I always just say sewing people are the best people. Like, I love and respect the people that we work for so much. And I care about what they think. But sometimes I feel like I care too much to the point where it's not healthy. And so I've had to build healthy boundaries to kind of like protect myself and protect my business. And it means that I need to engage with that feedback in a different way, where I can't go and on a bad day when people are upset with us about something, it's not healthy for me to go and get really emotionally invested in that feedback. The team, like, it gets to me. Like, if it comes back to me, the feedback gets to me, but it is filtered, and it'll be like, we are hearing this, right? Rather than here is like this really angry comment for somebody who's really upset with you, because that's the kind of stuff I can't let go of. So we are definitely hearing and responding to that feedback, and it is coming in. I don't want people to feel like they're screaming into the void, but I've had to do it in a way that's protective of myself, and so that I can keep doing this. So anyway, I feel like I wanted to come back to that because I don't want people to feel like I don't care what they think. I do.
100%. And I think that comes through loud and clear for sure. And I think we're glad that you've taken those steps. So you can keep doing this. So let's get to your list. Your first item, and I've heard of this before, but I have never used it. It's called Todoist, and it's an online planner.
It's the best. It is the absolute best. So I used to use a physical planner. Mm-hmm. RIP, what is that amazing?
Get to Workbook.
Get to Workbook. Okay, RIP Get to Workbook. That's what I used to buy. I used to buy a workbook from Elise every year. But then the problem with a physical planner is that it needs to physically be on you for you to keep track of all of your to-dos. And my to-dos are relentless. So Todoist is basically an online day planner. And what I love about it is that you can schedule recurring reminders. So I can reschedule, like, for example, we all know that we like sign up for apps or whatever, and then we forget about them. I have like a quarterly reminder to go through all my credit card statements and cancel apps and things like that we're not using, or annual reviews. So everybody who works for me, we get an annual review every year. So those are all calendarized. So I know, okay, it's time to schedule that. It's also available as a desktop or as an app. So if I'm like on the run and I'm like, ooh, I forgot something, I can add it to my Todoist, and then I can schedule it. It's just the greatest. And then it interacts with everything. So if somebody sends me a message on Slack, I can turn that Slack message into an item on my Todoist. We use Notions for project management, so I can do the same thing. It's literally changed my life. I don't know how I functioned without it. And if they ever went out of business, my business would probably go under.
Okay, great recommendation. New York Times games. So my husband, we just upgraded our talk about subscriptions, our New York Times subscription, so that we have the all access plan, which means that we get everything. We get the cooking app, which I love. We get all the games. Obviously, we get the New York Times subscription. We get all the podcasts. We get everything. And I honestly think that they've come up with one of the most brilliant, I call it a rundle, right? It's a recurring revenue bundle. And they've bundled really well and really figured out how to turn a print newspaper into a membership that is well worth paying for. So it sounds like you're enjoying the games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Canadian and I subscribe to the New York Times. And I do try to stay on top of the news, but right now, y'all, what is happening in the States right now is harrowing, and I cannot. So I really have to be in an emotionally self-destructive place if I want to go read what's happening in American politics right now. But anyway, so I'm less doom scrolling the news, and yes, definitely up in the food app. But for me, the thing that has kind of changed my life is the New York Times games. And that is because that in the morning, I wake up and I have a cup of tea. And if I'm not reading a book, you just kind of want to have that time to yourself to just like wake up and abstractly in the back of your mind think about what you have to do during the day. And that time used to be occupied with Instagram, and now I play the games on New York Times. So I obviously do Wordle, but I love Connections, and I'm obsessed right now with Spelling Bee. It is the highlight of my morning is sitting and doing the Spelling Bee. I'll do a crossword if I have more time. It's just the most delicious little app. They're really well designed. And it's good for your brain, keeps things juiced up and limber. And it's just kind of a way to have that mindless phone time, but in a way that I actually think is productive and constructive. So thank you, New York Times.
Yes, absolutely. And the last recommendation is something, and I've never heard of this, called SketchUp. It's like ketchup with an S at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think of fun things for you, Abby, and unfortunately I am quite boring and all I do is garden and listen to podcasts. So I was trying to think of some fun things. And besides the new Taylor Swift record, which like is all I'm listening to, but does not need a recommendation right now, I was trying to think of fun things to share with the audience. And so SketchUp is an app from my old interior design days. So it is a 3D modeling software. And when I was working as an interior designer, I used it every single day. And then obviously, in my new career, I am not as much in need of it, but I am renovating my house right now. And so I kind of have rediscovered how much I love the app. It's really, really easy and intuitive to use. They have a free online version of it. And so if you are working on a floor plan, if you are figuring out any kind of like home renovation, or even if you want to, design a cutting table for your sewing space, you can do it in SketchUp for free. And I just find it a really cool, easy to use 3D software that is just fun to use, and it's kind of like feels like playing a little bit of a video game, and I've kind of really reappreciated what a great free resource it is. So if anybody out there is just looking for something to help them kind of figure out those 3D solve problems, it is a wonderful tool.
Well, Heather, it's been great checking in again with you about where your business is now, and I hope in maybe less than 8 years from now, but we'll get back together and do it again. And I'm sure you'll be in a completely new place. And I'm excited to see where that is. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Abby. It was really fun talking to you.
And you've been listening to the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals. When you become a member of Craft Industry Alliance, you get in-depth coverage of craft industry news, the opportunity to connect with fellow professionals for advice and support, and access to an educational library filled with ideas, tools, and resources to help you as you build your business. Join us at craftindustryalliance.org. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.